Thanks for joining us this morning at this live webcast, one of Visual's live webcasts, one of many that we do on a weekly basis. Just as a way of introduction, my name is Tim G. I am the Public Sector Sales Manager here at Visual. And I was supposed to be joined today by Matt Showers, who's the manager of our practice manager of our business group, our business solutions team. But congratulations are in order for Matt because his wife gave birth to little Dylan Thomas at 12:30 last night. So he scooted his way back from Stafford back down to Essex last night to be with his young child. As a second best, obviously, I do have sat next to me Alan Rogers, one of the directors and co-owners of the business, but we haven't managed to prepare that much for this morning. We've had an hour or two, but given your level of experience, Al, I'm sure we'll run it through this in a concise way. So
I'd say it's the first time I've ever declared myself as not Matthew Showers.
Just in terms of the webcast today, just a little bit of guidance for you all. As you can imagine, we are going to mute all of your phones, if that's okay, just so that we put down some of the background noise as we're going through the webcast. There's a number of ways in which we can ask questions today. You can either, if you're coming in through the link client, then you can utilize the instant message window and ask us messages as they come through. We'll do our best to deal with those as they come through. Equally, you can email us at inquiries@risual.com, risual.com, and we'll pick up those questions as we go through the session. But failing that, we will open up the lines at the end of the webcast to take any questions that you've got and deal with them as best we can. We are recording this session today, so if we do have any issues, anybody not seeing the presentation or voice, then we'll make sure that you get the video sent through to you once we're done. So without further ado, what I wanted to do today was just quickly go through who are Visual and what we do as a business. I'm going to talk a little bit around that. I'm going to talk a little bit around our approach to engaging with customers and the approach that we take to helping customers deal with some of the challenges that they're approaching in the marketplace. And obviously, the nature of this webcast today is around utilizing one of the transformational propositions that we have in our portfolio called Optimised Service Vision for approaching a specific problem that I guess most of you on this call will have at the moment around Windows 2003 server end of life and the impact of that. And it's about really just kind of giving you some ideas today. It's going to be very conversational around how we have approached this with some of our current customers, how we can potentially help you and give you some guidance around utilizing this optimized service vision approach for not only mitigating any issues around the Windows 2003 end of life, but also getting the best out of the infrastructure and optimizing infrastructure over time. So without further ado, I'm just going to quickly give you a bit of background around Visual. So Visual are we've been going around, we're just coming up to our 10th birthday, which is a real proud moment for us all. We are 100% Microsoft focused in our approach and our propositions, and quite uniquely in the marketplace, I think we have expertise across most Microsoft workloads, so we deal with most Microsoft products. We are just a services company. We're not held to any hardware or licensing as such, but we are obviously just dealing with Microsoft technologies, either at the beginning of a licensing deal for you with Microsoft or at the end of a licensing deal when you've done the licensing deal and getting the best value out of that licensing deal from Microsoft. And from a services perspective, we're really split into three key services areas. From a business consultancy perspective, we have a business group where we have our strategic consultants, architects, engagement management, project management, where we're really kind of helping customers to understand, without going straight into product, how Microsoft technologies can help them transform their business and align to critical priorities. that's a real growing business for us, particularly for public sector. I'm seeing around 40, 45%, 50% growth year on year on the business consultancy division in my business. Equally, and where I guess the business is growing from is premium technical consultancy and services. And we're very proud to say that we have near on 50 technical consultants across these practices. And as you can see from the slide in front of us, we very much focus our consultants into specifically named practices that focus on specific Microsoft products and business productivity. We deal with SharePoint and CRM, unified communications and messaging is Link, Exchange and Office 365, systems management, so all things System Center, Hyper-V, desktop management. Identity access and perimeter is a really important practice for us, even though it's one of our smallest practices, because it actually underpins a lot of what we do in terms of Active Directory, identity management, security, and plays a specific part in helping us to put Office 365 or cloud-based solutions where there's an on-premise or hybrid solution that's in place and managing that identity. And also, as Al puts it, our secret application development team, which is a growing team focused around development on things like SharePoint and CRM, etc. And of course, when we architect and align those solutions and install those solutions, then equally we have a division that manages and supports those solutions as they're putting in. It's a growing business for us again, in terms of making sure that you have a managed service wrapped around the things that we deploy for you from the Microsoft technologies. That very much sits alongside investments like Premier support that you might have already invested in Microsoft. Subtly different in our approach. Obviously, we're managing and supporting installations specific to you, and we also do a lot of proactive management and monitoring of desktop and server to make sure that you proactively know when those servers have got potential issues and make sure that they're optimized in the right way. So that's all I wanted to really talk about in terms of Regional as a business. You'll see some of this come to life as we talk through this Windows End of Life and Optimized Service Vision topic today. I did want to talk a little bit around some of the conversations that we are having with our customers at the moment. And regardless of whether those customers are in public sector or commercial sector, we do find that our conversations are being drawn around two key areas, really. Improving costs, that could be a balance of costs in public sector or reduction in costs in some ways, but generally calling improving costs, balance with improvement of outcomes. And as you can see from here, there's some general themes that we tend to get involved in with customers, whether it's just generally trying to make sure that cost efficiencies are realized across the whole of the business, but we generally see that things are we're being challenged on things like customer service, partnering, multidisciplinary teams and collaboration, information access and transparency or business intelligence, and as well as maintaining quality through all of those things for all of our customers. And for us, it's about making sure that technology is not seen as an inhibitor here or a cost center, but technology is really as an enabler for all of these things and is aligned to essentially generating positive change. So whilst we've got a whole bunch of technology and product focused propositions, what we tend to do in almost all of our conversations is trying to lift those conversations up to how IT can be at the heart of positive change. And this is really important for the conversation today. And essentially, we've got three key transformational propositions that we talk to our customers on. First and foremost, it's around understanding how our customers are engaging with their customers or their partners. And in public sector, that could be patients, students, citizens, consumers. But understanding what's really at the heart of driving your business and how that drives from a connected business in scenarios. If we know what that is, which is critically important to our customers, then we can also look at what is essentially underpinning the workforce that you have in your organization from an empowerment perspective. We see that as a proposition called end user computing. And then lastly, underpinning all of that is the infrastructure stuff, the IT stuff. And whilst this seems very simple in its concept, it becomes very, very powerful when we start to align these three stages, these three propositions to essentially business cases to get IT empowered projects working through a company. And what we're going to talk about today around Windows 2003 end of life server stuff is really at underpinning all of these things where we see empowerment of the workforce and engagement of customer. It's really important because with these things that you have in the infrastructure, the other things cannot exist without a very solid, secure, managed infrastructure in place. And particularly when you see things like technologies going end of life, and I guess the clue is in the title of Windows 2003, given that it's 11 years old now, coming up to 12 years old. You really do need to think about what that means. So when we look at this topic or agenda today, Windows 2003 end of life, which we know is coming in July 2015. So we've still got a little bit of time to affect this. But I guess the question is, so what? Why is this important to you? And I guess this isn't, like the picture says, this isn't about success and failure, but actually being conscious of what this really means to you as a customer. And this is where we're really helping customers to understand the impact of this, because there might be minimum impact for each of you, depending on where you are right now, how much you've done already in terms of transitioning some of the servers that you've got. There might be some isolated services that are underpinning some of your business critical applications, but just thinking about that term in itself, what are your business critical applications, and do you know what they rely on? What is the infrastructure that underpins those business critical applications? Is there any application compatibility issues where you're moving those applications to a new infrastructure over time? Alan, have you got any other?
Yeah, I mean, application compatibility is typically the reason why you're still running the legacy OS 12 years on. So you're typically be in that situation either through budgetary constraint or because you're running a line of business app, and that's why you're in that position now. I guess the key thing to understand then is, is that affecting your ability to meet service level agreements? And as you start to plan for change, you then have to think about how you meet those service level changes. What is your migration method going to do to either improve or affect those? And I guess going forward then, I guess, if you look at some of those deployments that people have done on Server 2003, they will typically have been done 5 or 7 years ago, or obviously as long as 12 years ago. Things have changed a lot, and therefore things like service levels might not have been things that you had in place in your organization back then, but you typically will now. And also then in terms of the future, if you've been able to run a 2003 environment without having to stick to service level agreements, typically you're going to have those applied to you in the future. And then the other big things that most people are worried about are how long is it going to take to migrate? Obviously, there's a complexity in this, and there's typically a reason why you haven't touched this for 12 years. And basically, the timelines are a key issue. Obviously, you have this pending date of July 2015. Post that, obviously, you're not going to be able to get the security updates you'd expect. And in the same way we had issues with NT4 migrations back in the day, you're going to be in a position where you're wanting to think about isolating those services so they don't cause a security threat to the network, how to mitigate any of those security issues that you're going to have to put on your risk registers, and therefore how to mitigate that by getting getting things moved out as quickly as possible. And then the key thing Tim's talking about there is obviously in terms of resourcing, then you've typically got all of your people busy keeping the lights on and keeping the business running. How are you then going to be able to impact this within those timescales and those constraints? And obviously then think about all of the complexity about making sure that this is done in a way that it keeps things working as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a key thing, isn't it? As you say, Al, the main reason where we see this is in play is generally because of legacy applications, a need that's been there for a while, the fact that these applications generally port to the new platform particularly well. And I guess, when we understand that, then you can try and isolate those applications and try and do a workaround to make sure that there isn't issues, any risks are mitigated. But I guess generally, when we look at the Windows Server environment, then technology on the Windows Server platform has accelerated so much across 2007, across 2000, the latest versions. And again, a lot more benefit by moving to that platform in terms of power, efficiency, security.
Yeah, and what you're leading to is that typically, although you've got something that works, you've probably not got the best solution you could have.
Yeah.
And therefore things, there is an opportunity to have something that's significantly better on the later platform.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really important point. And I think that's the thing when you look at these projects, if you're not careful, they can look like they're just a single negative cost to move from one platform to another. But if you think about it, as you're saying, in terms of what extra can we get out of it, then you can actually turn them into positive projects which can deliver business value as well as running away from a burning platform.
Yeah.
Which is actually that's the least important aspect of this, really, isn't it? Because what we're saying is the most important thing is moving, not about moving away from a burning platform, but actually moving towards improving delivery, improving IT delivery, and adding business benefit through great security and great uptime and those kind of things.
Well, these kind of critical events or these kind of compelling events, whether it's of our making or Microsoft making, I mean, Microsoft are very clear around the support timelines for certain products, so this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone that's tracking that.
No, I mean it might be a surprise if you call something that happens over a 12-year period a surprise, but most people think a surprise happens in an instant. So yeah.
But we see the same with platforms like Windows XP. XP's done a fantastic job across, particularly in public sector, in terms of standardizing the desktop, and managing desktop. But again, a 14, 15-year operating system that's time to move. And again, we're seeing a lot of opportunity, a lot of people using this opportunity through forced change, like you say, to use it as positive change and to turn this into a platform, utilize this compelling event, this critical event to transform their infrastructure and have something that's future-proof.
Yeah, and you make a point that subsequently the 2003 was developed at a time when that was just at the Microsoft trustworthy computing stage. So when they were just really starting to get security, and it was the first version which started to have some form of lockdown. But obviously 2008 and everything subsequently after that was much better.
Yeah.
So there are some significant points which show the age of the OS.
So I guess what we're saying here is we don't know how this is going to impact you. The key thing here is starting to think about it if you haven't already. And I guess there's three levels of things that we've broken out here. What is critical to your business? What applications are sitting on this platform? And at the moment, understanding that Microsoft stuff, Windows Server is critical to business. Most people don't realize that, particularly when you think around the server platform or things like Active Directory is critical to the business, no matter what applications you're running on that platform. How can the middle bit here in terms of service levels and future service levels is taking the opportunity to take this critical issue or compelling event to transform the business and start to look a little bit more further than the problem at hand, and then really looking at essentially how you affect that, how you move from that platform to the future and future proof what you want to do on that platform. And I guess that's where really we wanted to talk to you about today is really an approach that we have taken over the course of the last couple of years based on us working with customers around Microsoft infrastructure and transformation. And we, as you heard earlier, what we're calling this is optimized service vision. It's the infrastructure layer to getting everything ready to empower your workforce and drive better results with your customers.
Yeah, so I think the key thing is, if I just elaborate on what OSV is basically it's almost a philosophy for customers to think about moving IT to a service-led approach. So delivering email as a service, delivering websites as a service, delivering instant messaging, collaboration as a service, and starting to help people abstract away from running stuff on tin and attaching workloads to servers, and start to think about the best way to deliver things. And as a customer, you might think that starts to lead you naturally to things like virtualization, embracing cloud, etc., etc. But what we're looking to do is fundamentally help customers think about service level agreements, service management frameworks, understand the way to best interact with the business and give them feedback around availability, create things like service catalogs. So do a much better job of delivering IT as a service. And as I say, the key thing is moving from a tactical provisional workload for a project, stand the workload up, and then keep it fed and watered for its lifetime, to moving to a much more strategic approach of delivering it as a full service. And that's what Optimised Service Vision is. So there's a number of things in there. It's a broad and fully encompassing approach. So it's everything in the data center. It encompasses everything from storage through to server delivery, application delivery, identity, security, the whole thing. Now, in terms of context of today, this is kind of what we're starting to say. You can look at these things in a much more of a transformational and strategic approach. If you think about how our OSV will extend to Windows Server 2003, then it's about taking those workloads, those candidates as they sit today, and then move them into that infrastructure and move them into that approach. And you start to think of the things that we have as our capability within our approach. You start to play all of those to the solution. So we'll probably talk about that a little more in a minute. I guess the key thing to then talk about is kind of how we would do this and how we would approach it. So the first phase, if we were to engage within a project, would obviously do the initial initiation. That would be define the scope, define the input, the end state vision. And that's, again, looking a little bit above just technology. So where do we actually want to end up, and what are we trying to achieve as an overall outcome here? Much more than just eradicate Server 2003. We then would want to move into a technical discovery phase. Now, this is very much around analysing what you've got, assessing all of the workloads, and then categorising them. And we come up with a simple categorisation system. So that's about obviously taking green applications, which are simple to migrate, to maybe simple IS websites, which are just going to cut and paste onto a more modern platform. There may be applications where there is a simple upgrade process, in-place upgrade, that kind of stuff. So we can look at those. You've then got your complex applications, which may require some rework, some retooling, a complex version upgrade, or your version upgrade on your application may mean that you need to install a later version, do some reconfiguration because you're on a later version application, for example. Those ones are going to need a little bit more planning, a little bit more thought, typically more business conversations, but a lot more communication out to the organization. And then your red ones are the ones where there is no way to go from here to there, and therefore you're going to need to start thinking innovatively about either preserving that workload, and then learning how to deal with the issue of retaining Server 2003, which is then all around building layers of security, segmenting it off into secure areas of your network, layering in all the relevant kind of security stuff around intrusion prevention, all that kind of stuff that you're going to have to think about. Or come up with a method of driving around rather than through the problem and start to deploy alternative applications and alternative configurations. And then the last one is kind of the ones that you would like to see is blue applications, where those are as part of this process you can have an element of rationalization and get rid of certain applications. And we typically see this as a common thing. So it's in the same when you do an XP or a desktop rollout, you'll find that the applications and choices people have made historically will be a point in time. But in the future, where the operating system has gained more capability and requirements have changed, you'll find that you typically don't need those things now. So there are a lot of examples where we do an XP desktop replacement project, where customers will have an application catalog in the hundreds, and they'll end up with a completed migration with an application catalog in the tens. And you see a typical situation when you're doing the data center and moving with Server 2003. So lots of things like Active Directory, DHCP, DNS, all those core infrastructure services have all improved, which will help you get greater density and coexistence of roles as well, particularly where needed as well. And then after you've done that initial discovery phase, where you've worked out what you've got, how much of it you've got, how complex it is, you can then build it into individual work streams. So the green ones, typically you can go and set up as one parallel work stream. The amber ones, you need to engage your best business people, your BAs, to start to go and communicate to the business the change that's going to be required. Similarly with your red applications, and then the blue ones, that's typically going to be some reconfiguration or decommission work to pull those out. So you could theoretically look, if you had enough resource, at approximately four work streams, or probably merge the blue and green together and then merge the red and amber together. Your red and amber is going to consume the most resource typically, and it's going to need the most business engagement to make sure you communicate properly. And then you basically fall into a standard delivery framework then. So into planning each application, migration if they're the green, amber and red ones. Greens and blues are going to be a much shorter process. Building new stuff where you need to, then moving that into testing, so moving through functional and non-functional testing, and then into full deployment, and then handing it over into a BAU scenario, hopefully on a nice new shiny platform, and you haven't had to retain too much of the legacy stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I mean, I see this, the optimized service vision proposition, whilst it does lift us from that specific issue, we've seen a lot of customers really appreciate this approach and kind of surround them around the approach, because it's giving so much more than just the problem at hand, which we were talking about before.
Well, it's about giving someone a strategic direction, isn't it? So often in IT, you can get overwhelmed by the fact that you've got a project that has to go live next week. You've got all the other operational issues, and you can fall into a responsive mode where you're just provisioning workloads and applications. And what we're trying to do is help people think a bit bigger than that, so that once you're on the front foot and you're leaning into the problem, you're not necessarily having to deal in the reaction, being so reactionary, because that's how typically organizations can end up with service sprawl, lots of unneeded complexity and that kind of thing. And it's when you can move into leading with a strategic view that you can typically not end up in some of these pickles. And it can be a very negative process, because all the time you're being tactical, you're making more and more changes that aren't necessarily strategic as well, and you're just making an even bigger mess to unpick.
Yeah.
So again, if you can move to a strategic thought as soon as possible, then you're just really removing all the problems for the future.
So I guess I put these questions together, but obviously I kind of thinking people and customers on the line thinking, well, what would they be thinking, given that we've just said there's an issue, let's look broader than the issue, which might create more challenges for them in terms of strategic challenges or more resource challenges. So I guess just a few questions that I just wanted to get your view on as to why this works for us and why it's worked for the customers to engage. So I guess the key thing is to the point we've just been mentioning, why take this transformational approach now rather than just a kind of band-aid upgrade, that inevitably would be essentially less resource in the short term.
But I think the thing is when you're going to fill in a business case, and your business case is going to say, I want to spend some money from go to A to B. B is only marginally further along the road than you are now, which is the same problem, just on a different OS version.
Yeah.
And if you think about the long-term business value out of that, all you've done is move the problem, a couple of yards down the road. You've not actually made anything better.
Yeah.
And now, if you look at the amount of pounds you've spent to achieve that, the amount of return on those pounds will be relatively little. So while it may be an instinctive and responsive thing, and sometimes you will still have to do this, there's nothing wrong with having to do tactical things when you really need to. But if you can come up with an approach that lets you have a longer term view, then hopefully your return on every pound you spend will be significantly greater. And typically, if you're, it's like anything in life, if you have a longer term view, then you typically don't have to make all the short term tactical steps you need to get there, and you typically save money. So I guess the two things are, A, getting more out of the money you spend is the way you'd want to look a little bit further up, and B, you're going to get more for your money by doing it.
And I guess if we are looking strategically at a direction, and the direction of travel could be taking us into post 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, then I'm sure everybody on the line will be, to my second question here, thinking about how they can look at a consumption model, a cloud model to affect this platform as well. How do we see that in the way that this transformational approach?
Well, this is the key tenet to our optimized service vision. I didn't want to talk about it too much. I knew some of these questions were coming up, but when you move to delivering IT as a service, either on premise yourself or in the cloud, then you're fundamentally moving to a model where you're able to start to calculate and tell people how much something costs, and how much it costs to deliver it for that person or lots of people. And how much it will continue to cost to run it over a period of time. And you start to think about a consumption model, which the cloud naturally leads you to, you really want to understand how much it costs today, how much it's going to cost tomorrow, and how much it will cost cumulatively over those 2 days. And if you think about the cloud, then that's why the cloud really helps you, because if you think about the pound you make as an investment, you immediately want a pound or greater return on value. And this is where our approach is helping you move towards in terms of thinking, so that you can start to think about, in terms of delivering a mailbox, I can deliver a mailbox today on premise. I can go and buy some servers. I can spend, 100 grand on the SAN and some servers up front, or I could pay, a few pounds or a few pence per user per month and have no upfront investment. And therefore, the total cost over a 3-year period may be equal, but the point being is that the return on that investment happens immediately.
Yeah.
So if you're to go and build an exchange platform, for example, or any other platform, you're going to spend 100 or 200 or 300 grand or whatever up front, but then you're not going to get any actual business benefit out of that until 2 or 3 months later, or maybe even longer, when all of your users are using it. The cloud model allows you to get an immediate return immediately. So if you pay £1 for a mailbox, you move a user onto it, you get an immediate return on that £1. It's completely different. So that's how cloud helps, and that's how this approach starts to help you think about some of those red workloads, and some of those amber workloads. Potentially there's options about moving those workloads out to the cloud. So where you've got legacy applications, are the cloud alternatives that allow you to just re-provision based on a cloud alternative. If you think about the cost of that project, well, the migration project's typically expensive, and you've got to buy the new app and all that kind of stuff up front. If you're purchasing from the cloud, then you don't make the upfront investment. So the actual cost of doing that is only the cost of change, which again positively affects the project economically. So I think this kind of question is kind of, what are the economic loopholes in getting out of this problem? I say the cloud is important because you don't have those upfront charges to go and move to an alternative option. So you may still have the time constraints around doing the business planning properly, getting the configuration right, but what you won't have is that huge 6-figure sum up front to actually go and do something. You completely can remove that, and that's where the cloud really helps. And naturally, as a strategic option, you want to get to the point where you have less stuff to manage and less stuff to own in the future, so this problem, when it comes around again with the next wave of OS or whatever it will be, isn't actually going to be yours to worry about.
And I guess by cloud, just to be very clear with people, when we're talking about cloud in this scenario here, because you've mentioned Office 365 and productivity tools, but talking specifically about how Azure and the Azure platform can help in this server, this infrastructure environment for certain workloads, for disaster recovery, for non-production or development or DR.
Yeah, exactly. And like and as you're explaining, if you're moving to Azure and 365, then obviously you never need to think about Microsoft clustering services ever again. You never need to think about replicating to a standby data center. You're not going to think about offsite tapes and tape management. All those kind of normal day-to-day infrastructure issues just go away. So your cumulative costs of managing a platform start to reduce. Obviously, you start to think about the capability that's in Azure, then obviously there's significant benefits. But then the other thing is obviously, where there is a non-Microsoft option in terms of an application that they don't provide, say you have some kind of finance app that's delivered today, that vendor may have a cloud option as well. And that's the point, in terms of addressing the security and the infrastructure issues, then Azure and 365 are naturally the first things in your mind. But naturally, when you start to think about the workloads that are running on some of those those Server 2003 servers, there may be cloud alternatives as well. And that's the point, embracing any cloud vendor for those other applications is also a good idea. To get all of your kind of common Microsoft workloads, get those to 365, don't have those headaches anymore, don't worry about mailbox sizes, don't worry about clustering, don't worry about multi-site redundancy. On SANs and all that kind of stuff, and just dump all of that on Azure and get rid of that problem too. But then those specific application workloads that force you to have to deal with the problem in the first place, a lot of those could actually go up to all the cloud-based applications too. And that's where the cloud will really help you, because you're not putting in the upfront cost. You're not filling in a 6-figure or a 7-figure investment application. Go and do this stuff. We're looking at being diverse and pushing these things away in different directions.
Yeah, and again, engage with some customers myself, particularly in public sector. I guess there's still a few people out there that are generally worried about the cloud, worried about the impact of the cloud in terms of their own control, worried about their impact of the cloud in terms of security and governance. But I guess the key thing here is that this is an inevitable direction of travel. There isn't going to be any respite or or offset of this direction of travel by people like Microsoft in the marketplace. These services are only going to get more effective, more cost effective, more secure, more governed through time.
I think the key thing is that if you think about kind of the security elements, for example, is that to provide a level of on-premise security for these things, and that costs a lot of money. If you think about Azure as a platform, Microsoft have got a reputational risk around enticing you to run their stuff, your stuff on their stuff on Azure, and therefore the investments they need to make will be more significant than ones than you would need to make. So typically you're getting a security upgrade because Microsoft have got more to lose cumulatively than you have as an individual organization typically. So if you think about the investment in the platform, then that's obviously there. And then in terms of the other key issues are obviously around repudiation and things like safe harbor and that kind of stuff. In the UK, that diligence has been done by the British government anyway, in terms of accrediting the platform. So it's obviously accredited to official, and it's also supported for official sensitive if you apply additional encryption to your data as well. So from a public sector perspective, that's already been done. If you're in the private sector, then there must be some comfort in knowing that the British government are happy and bearing in mind the damages that they would have to pay to citizens if they lost your data or something happened to you as a result of the data they stored about you being misappropriated. They're happy to commit to those kind of levels of spend. So if you look at the risk scoring mechanism, you talk about the cost. So if you look at the ICO, Information Commissioner's Office will fine organisations. Those fines are proportional to the amount that they would expect an organisation to have to pay to a member of the public if the British government was to lose their data and make a damages claim against the British government. You think about if the British government have risk assessed this and got to the point where they're comfortable for it, then in most business scenarios, then that's a greater level of assurance than you would be able to provide yourself. And the diligence that have gone into that is significant.
So this is great stuff, right? And I guess the point here is we're trying to see that this potentially negative challenge that we've got here around end of life, certain products can be turned into something very positive and something transformational. So I guess leading to my third question here, Al, I know how long is a piece of string? I guess in many respects we need to get engaged with customers, but what kind of effort is required in engaging to make this happen? Is there any kind of prerequisites that the customers should be doing in terms of preparing for a private cloud or virtualization on premise and things like that?
So you made the most significant point is you don't know because you don't know how long a piece of string is. The most important thing is again do your assessment, do your categorization, classify your apps. Do something like our 4-stage our 4 classification process. Classify your apps, and then you're at that point going to definitively know how long and how many people, and how much it's going to cost. That's the first thing you have to do. And again, every customer is unique. So again, back to your piece of string thing. But the most important thing is get that assessment done. So use an approach like ours, categorize them, and then you can easily work it out. And that's the most important thing.
And I know you talked loosely around some of the benefits, particularly in cloud, but is there any other specific benefits that kind of taking this wider approach we found in those engagements for customers?
Well, I mean, the key thing is you by moving to an optimized service vision approach, by moving to delivering as a service, you become much more agile. You can respond quicker. So ironically, thinking strategically allows you to be much better at being tactical, peculiarly. But it does. So if you're delivering your mail through 365 in the cloud, someone rocks up and says they want another 100 mailboxes tomorrow, that's a few buttons for you to press. Historically, that would have been about a planning engagement, whether you're going to run out of SAN capacity, disk IOPS, all that kind of stuff. By moving to this approach, you actually become much better at being reactionary, which is a peculiarity. And then the other things are obvious ones about being able to deliver a better level of service because the infrastructure that you can invest in is typically the better. So if you think about Azure, 17 data centers globally, real-time replication, yada yada, most organizations won't be able to have that themselves, or won't be able to offer it those same levels of availability. You're going to get more than what you would typically be paying for if you did it for yourself. And you're going to pay less typically for it as well, because you're not going to make an upfront investment and you're going to get all of the capability with all of the costs to be returned over the period of time rather than actually immediately. So the kind of 3 benefits are you can be more agile, no need to be tactical in the future, save more money, and you get better. for it.
Yeah, that's great, Al.
I should be in sales, shouldn't I?
You should be. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing to mention here is with Matt going home last night, you didn't see these questions actually. These questions were new to you. So.
Those are my real answers. I'm working them out as we go, so I'm stuttering a bit.
So that's good. I think just a couple of points to make before we conclude here. One is this session was meant to spark some interest and spark some ideas for you. We don't have all the answers, but we wanted to just kind of take a view of giving you some direction on how we would approach it. This type of webcast is not our typical webcast where we're asking questions and having conversation. I'd love to get your feedback on that. Whether
it feels
more
like a podcast than a webcast.
This one, Ricky Gervais type scenario there going on. But it would be good to get your feedback on that, whether it works for you, whether the information has been useful. So just to conclude then, for us, certainly just wanted to kind of reiterate that as we step through these optimized service vision engagements, certainly for us, it's not just all about installing and architecting and deploying these solutions for you, but having an eye on the fact that it needs to be managed. And particularly for us, it's a growing part of our business in terms of workload support based on on-premise servers or in the cloud, like Managed 365, or a complete managed service that could take desktop server and some of the network operations into perspective. We've got a lot of good customers case studies and a growing customer base taking these services from us. And then equally, just in terms of the next steps and actions for us, a couple of things to highlight here. These live meetings are regular events for us. We tend to use or deliver one a week. I know that we are going to be doing some more around Windows end of life, particularly around the architecture and build, based on what we've talked about today. So please look out for those. We are going to be building out some knowledge share workshops as well, depending on interest. So getting half a dozen of people in a room with a consultant and whiteboarding the things that we're talking about today with you, so you get more hands-on and connection with the consultants. Particularly around optimized service vision, we start those engagements generally with a vision and scoping exercise. It can be anything between 5 and 10 days based on the documentation that we deliver for you and the strategy that we deliver for you. If you just want to get on with doing stuff, then as Al highlighted earlier, we have a kind of commoditized approach through deployment services, design and planning, build, test, deploy, training, support that we can help you with. And I guess equally, I make no excuses for the fact if you're on this webcast today, you will probably get a call from one of our guys just saying, how do you think it went? Was it useful to you? But take the opportunity to speak to us, see whether we can help you. We're really pleased to help you with anything that you've heard today that you would see of interest. So without further ado, I know we're just a little bit over time. We started a little bit late today, but be happy to take any questions on instant message or Grace. I don't know if we've had any by email or take any by voice, if we can open up the lines.
Yep, sure. I'll just unmute everyone now.
Anybody got any questions for us on the approach or any commentary for us?
I've got someone typing in the IM box as we speak.
Okay. It's a long question. Yes, slides we can send through to you all. As say, the slides and the session is recorded as well. So we'll get the we tend to put them onto YouTube so people can go back to them at their leisure. Was there any other questions for us? Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully, we'll get some interesting conversations with you post this webcast. Hope you have a good day and speak to you soon. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye.